This is Calvin Castan. We're just setting up here, and David Patrick's about to start. It's the annual Dewey Tavern ceremony as far as the commemoration of the Battle of Plattsburgh. This is where the Battle of Plattsburgh started. Well, 197 years ago. The Battle of Plattsburgh actually started here when the British started invading this area about August 25th. And today's September 3rd. And right about this time, the British started to move their 14,000 troops closer to Plattsburgh. They marched, of course, through Chazy and Beekmantown, and eventually the September 11th battle in Plattsburgh. So we're here for the annual ceremonies. Celine Paquette is in charge. David Patrick does the majority of the work. They're looking at clouds over their shoulders. We may change our angle if they can't get the microphone working close good. We may change our angle. A lot of the familiar faces. There'll be several speakers here today, and we're going to go from here to the cemetery, the Dewey Cemetery, and that's just a few thousand feet that way. And following the Battle of Plattsburgh, the British came back here to Dewey Tavern, which is located here in the corner across from northeastern Clinton, and on 276 in Champlain, Route 276, about 2 or 3 miles from the Canadian border. And British came back here with their wounded, the ones who didn't survive.
1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3.
They're buried in the Dewey Cemetery. So let's listen real close. The speaker is not overwhelming. Let's hear what David Patrick has to say. David, of course, a descendant or a distant relative of the founder of Champlain, Mr. Pliny Moore, and of course the McClellans that kept so much of the Champlain history alive for so many years.
Can we ask you to take your seats, please?
Celine Paquette. As soon as the crowd quiets down a bit, she'll get underway. Get Booth over there, getting them quiet down.
Welcome to our 6th annual ceremony at Dewey Tavern. It's another beautiful day to begin our commemoration events for the Battle of Plattsburgh week. Again this year, I want to begin by thanking Louis and Rita Bedard for hosting us here. It's always good to be here, and we thank you for sharing your historic home with us. Also, thank you to David Patrick, who spends a lot of hours organizing this event every year. And we can't forget Elias Dewey for building this wonderful home and tavern. If it weren't for Elias Dewey, we would not be here today commemorating events that took place almost 200 years ago. And welcome to all of you. If you were not here today, there would not be a ceremony today. There are a few persons I would like to recognize here. The speakers I will introduce as they come up in the program. With us today, again, thankfully, wonderfully, we have Joy and Roy Carter from England, descendants of Colonel Willingham. Welcome. Always good to have you here. They're here in the front row. Bill Glidden, who is the deputy historian for the town of Plattsburgh, and also very active in the Sons of the American Revolution, I believe. Are there any other historians that I am missing or visiting dignitaries here?
Bob Cheeseman.
Oh, Bob Cheeseman, of course. How can I forget Bob? We were chatting here earlier. Bob is a historian for town of Chazy. So, welcome, Bob. I have 2 announcements to make. First, I want to announce that today's ceremony is a 2-part ceremony. After we finish here at Dewey's Tavern, we invite you to cross the road to Dewey Cemetery, where there will be a raising of a British flag. The second announcement, Kit Booth is here today and is selling Battle of Plattsburgh buttons along with this wonderful reference. I have a copy here. This is great. For the price of $10, and this button will admit you to all the Battle of Plattsburgh events during the week. It's a tremendous bargain. The first person I would like to introduce today is Alan Racine, Town of Champlain's Highway Superintendent. He will bring greetings from the Town of Champlain.
Yeah, the mic is in and out. This is Alan Racine, Highway Superintendent, Town of Champlain, and the fellow who mowed the Dewey Cemetery acreage for us.
Good day, everybody. Thank you, Celine. I'd like to thank David Patrick, number one, for doing this event this year. Did a great job. And I'd like to thank the organizers for choosing Champlain to be the first one to prepare for a week. I'm here from the town. I live in Champlain all my life. If you were going to go over the hill here and down the hill and up a hill and down the hill, there's where I live. I've been there all my life. I'm proud to be there. It's one of the oldest homes in Champlain. There's a steel sign saying that my house was one of the oldest homes in Champlain and that it was a commissary during the War of 1812. And thanks to David this year, I'm supposed to get an interpretive panel, hopefully, be put up this year. And that's about all I got to say. So thank you very much for listening to me for a few minutes.
Thanks, Alan. Our next speaker does not need an introduction. David Patrick has been very instrumental in promoting the history of Champlain. We all know about his annual historic calendar and his meticulous research. He has served as a member of the board of the Battle of Plattsburgh Association for 6 years, and he organizes this annual event here at Dewey's Tavern. David will share some of the history of Dewey's Tavern.
Hopefully the rain holds off for a while and it doesn't even come. So anyway, we are standing here today at one of Clinton County's most historic sites. This is the site of Dewey's Tavern, built in 1800 by Elias Dewey. This intersection used to be called Dewey's Corners. Elias Dewey came to Champlain in 1797 and built a log cabin here. Originally the house had only a blanket over the door. Elias lived here with his wife and children before he built his main house in 1800. He later built the addition and converted his house to a tavern since it was on the main road from Albany to Canada. In June of 1812, the War of 1812 started, and Dewey's house was frequented by officers of both the American and British armies. The Deweys were fearful that they would have to leave the tavern. So when Mrs. Dewey packed up some of her goods into the boxes, a young officer ran his sword through the barrels of boxes in hopes of finding a spy. I've actually seen that particular mirror. The roads here saw several American armies pass on the way to Canada to conquer Montreal. In November of 1812, General Henry Dearborn's 5,000-man army passed up this road to Lacole, where he was defeated by the British. In September of 1813, General Wade Hampton's army camped in these fields before his defeat in Ottletown a few days later. In March of 1814, General James Wilkinson's army held siege to the stone mill in Lacole, and 120 soldiers were killed or wounded. The wounded were brought here to Dewey's. Elias's daughter Drusilla was told that the house and shed, which is this log cabin here, were overflowing with soldiers who were laying on the floors. When the soldiers died, they were buried in the Dewey family cemetery across the road, where we'll be in a few minutes. In June of 1814, Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Forsyth's riflemen engaged militia just up the road on Route 276 at the Hamilton House, across from where the Grimshaws used to live, now the Duda House. Forsyth's plan was to lure the Canadians back to Dewey's, where a larger force was hiding. The Americans ran into Hamilton's house, which is now gone, and the house was pierced 54 times with musket shot. The family hid in fear in the basement. Unfortunately, Forsyth was killed by an Indian on the side of the road when he stood up on a log. Forsyth was buried on Oak Street and is still someplace in the backyard of John Rowe's house. In revenge, the Canadian militia leader, Captain Mayhew, was ambushed in August near the same site. On his deathbed at the Plenty Moore House, he kindly warned Champlainers that a great invading army would enter their village in a few weeks and that they should flee to safety. Of course, he was referring to General Prevost's army. In the summer of 1814, the British and Americans were preparing for battle on Lake Champlain. American General Izard, whose army was stationed in the village of Champlain on the hill over St. Mary's Church, knew that Prevost was just over the border. He tried to delay his departure until he had no choice but to leave. He wrote, "I must not be responsible for the consequences of abandoning my present strong position. I will obey orders and execute them as well as I know how. Major General Brisbane commands at Ottletown. He said to have between 5,000 and 6,000 men with him. At Chambly are said to be about 4,000. Starting on August 27th, Izard's army marched from Champlain down to Plattsburgh. By August 29th, he had left the Plattsburgh area. On August 28th, the day after Izard left Champlain, a British Indian force crossed the border to determine if it was safe to enter Champlain. Plenty Moore, my relative, wrote in his diary, British Indian force came into Champlain. On September 1st, the left wing of the British Army marched down Route 276 and camped in the fields up and down the road, as well as at Dewey's. The right wing camped in the village of Champlain on Plenty Moore's land. Because the British Army was so large, the force was divided into 2 wings and 3 brigades. A total of about 10,000 to 14,000 soldiers were now camped here in Champlain, plus 300 Indians who were camped here in the field, as well as behind the Steve Southwick house on Oak Street. Their job was to shoot British deserters wandering the roads. The British Army's occupation of Champlain in August and September was mostly peaceful in nature. Their goal was not to plunder the village, but to march to Plattsburgh and engage the Americans. However, Generals Prevost and Brisbane issued orders urging the Champlain townspeople to abandon their allegiance and invited them to provide provisions for his army. When few villagers came forward, Prevost commandeered wagons and teams and loaded them with baggage and stores. They paid for their services with gold coins stored in kegs. The British Army remained in Champlain while their navy continued to prepare their warships for battle on Lake Champlain. When Prevost could wait no longer, he ordered his army to start their march to Plattsburgh. Plenty Moore wrote in his diary on September 4th, British Army, about 14,000 passed on to Chazy with 16 pieces of cannon. The left wing of the British Army left here and marched in groups of 4 abreast in bright red uniforms holding bayonets. They marched down Route 276 and on the Mason Road to Kings Bay, where they met some resistance. They then marched through Coopersville to Route 9. The right wing marched up Prospect Street and through the village of Champlain. When they crossed the Oak Street Bridge, right in front of the History Center, the soldiers played God Save the King, but Silas Hubble, the magistrate, objected, so they played Yankee Doodle instead. As the other Main Street Bridge by Church Street, a small skirmish took place. It took 12 hours for the soldiers to cross Oak Street Bridge and walk up Main Street to Route 11. The 2 wings met at Honeymoore's Corners and marched to Chazy. On September 11th, the Battle of Plattsburgh occurred. Townspeople could hear the sound of the cannons in Plattsburgh 20 miles away. Word soon spread that the British had lost. The troops hastily came back to Champlain and most were gone by September 13th. 1 brigade with heavy cannon was delayed until September 25th due to the poor roads. Local legend states that on the retreat back to Canada, the British left many of their wounded at this tavern. When the soldiers died, they were buried in nameless graves in the Dewey family cemetery in the field across from the school. The cemetery was established in the sandy section of the field and contained the Dewey's youngest children. At the time, who started dying around 1804. Most of the Dewey family was buried here over the years, as well as the Hamiltons started in 1814. Today, no trace of the cemetery remains, although most or all of the graves are surely still present. Next to Point of Fur, which was dedicated in 2009, this is the second most important military burial site in the town of Champlain, and it's a very sacred place. I hope that in the near future we can put up a historic marker, the blue and yellow one, commemorating the cemetery. Dewey's Tavern was also the site of 2 prisoner of war treaties. 2 of the 4 prisoner of war treaties signed during the entire war were negotiated here, and as well as at the Plenty Moore House, and signed here in this house. One agreement was signed on April 15th, 1814, and the second on July 16th. These agreements were never ratified by Congress, but were still adhered to by both sides. In conclusion, the town of Champlain has a rich history related to the War of 1812, and Dewey's Tavern is a significant part of this history. Thank you for coming.
Earlier I mentioned the August 25th date. That was wrong. I'm thinking of September 25th when they left. And August 28th is the day they first showed up here in Champlain. So August 28th through September 25th.
Great job with this. And being a descendant of Plenty Moore, we're fortunate that David is so interested in our local history. There's another person I'd like to mention here today, although she isn't here, and that is Carolyn Keene, who's editor of the Lake Champlain Weekly. I hope you've all seen this wonderful issue of the Lake Champlain Weekly. Here, again, all regarding the 1812. Be sure to pick up a copy today. It certainly is collectible.
It's free.
So we thank Carolyn for all the great work she does on behalf of North Country history. I am pleased to introduce Dr. Anastasia Pratt, our county historian, and someone who is very involved with the Northern New York Canadian American Genealogical Society. Anastasia will speak on the significance of Dewey's Tavern.
Thank you, Celine. Thank you, David, also for planning this, and thank you all for being here today. As a historian, I appreciate that because I really appreciate seeing people involved in and interested in our local history. So thank you. So my goal is to talk about the significance of Dewey's Tavern, but I have to confess I find that a huge challenge. Not because there's little significance, but really in fact because of the opposite. Because there are so many things I could talk about that I'm never quite sure where to go, and I certainly don't want to sit here and bore you or make you sit there and be bored for hours. So I'll just kind of briefly run through. Significant because it's the site of everyday life in the past. Significant because we get to see part of that everyday life in the structures that are around us and the wonderful historic signs we have. Significant because it saw the beginning of a war that on its own was hugely significant and really was our second war of independence, the moment when we truly crystallized our separation from Great Britain and our presence as the United States. A place that's significant because it saw the beginnings of peace, which I think is a gift that we've been able to enjoy for many centuries and something that also is worth remembering. It's a place that's significant because we come here year after year and remember the people who were here before us. The people who were here before us in the 1800s, but also the people who were here before us last year and 5 years ago and 10 years ago. So it's a place that's just brimming with importance. And all of that is too important to let go. So I guess as county historian, what I would like to say is thank you for being part of that story. Because you too are part of the significance of this site. And as long as you're here and we're all remembering and continuing to honor this place and the people who were here before us, then we keep building on that significance and we make this historic site truly sacred, as David said before. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia. We have a very special item on our agenda today. I will let David Patrick introduce it.
So, what's the other one?
I'm going to start at this end. 3 new interpretive
So
panels.
thanks to Lake Champlain Basin Program, 3 grants were awarded to the town and village of Champlain for 3 interpretive panels. And I was asked to come up with some material for the interpretive panels. The first one is for Dewey's Tavern. And Dewey's Tavern, like I took a USGS map here and aerial photograph and noted out the location of the tavern. There used to be a potash house. The potash house is actually where Calvin is standing right there today. You can see the stone still on the ground. Supposedly, or possibly, the soldiers were cared for in this potash house right where we're all standing. Also shown is pictures of the Deweys, the log cabin taken in the 1960s, and then there's 3 pictures I took the last few years ago. And what's interesting is before the metal siding was put up, you could actually see on this side, and you can see it around the corner, the actual axe cuts made by Elias Dewey in 1797, clear as day. To the top are 2 pictures of Elias and Lovisa Dewey, and I actually was able to find them. They were in another state, owned by a person who used to be distantly related to them, and they're now at the Clinton County Historical Association, owned by them, so they were donated. So these are the original paintings done around 1834 that were sitting in this house 200 years ago.
Or maybe 170 years ago, 175 years ago. Whoop.
Vanna White, I'm not.
Vanna's job is safe.
The next panel is it's a great picture. It's a painting of the Plenty Moore house. Plenty Moore, a Revolutionary War soldier who settled here in 1789, got the grant 1785, built this house basically is where the Clark Funeral Home is today, and that's a painting of him done in 1879 later. But this is an 1829 painting of the house done by a relative, showing what the house and grounds used to look like. A lot of activity occurred at this house throughout the entire war. Plenty was the judge, and American and British soldiers were knocking on his door monthly, if not daily, sometimes. And they were camped in his house. General Dearborn, 1812, made his house as headquarters, and he received a letter saying that he was assuming command of the Northern Army when he was at this house. Some prisoner of treaty negotiations occurred here. He wrote a letter to John Jacob Astor around that time, 1812, said, "Sorry, I cannot write to you, or I did not write to you." This was some months after, but my house was like a large hotel. All the principal officers of the American Army were in that house. And so a lot of activity occurred between 1812 and 1814.
And Clark Funeral Home, of course, is on Elm Street, about a mile to a mile and a half from our location. We are located about 2 to 3 miles south of the Canadian border on Route 276, adjacent to Northeastern Clinton Central School.
The third panel is the Plenty Moore Stone Farmhouse in Murray's Raid. Plenty Moore in 1808 built a house, stone farmhouse with 3-foot thick walls. It was going to be used just as a farmhouse for tenants, farmers that rented his house and land. And it's technically the oldest house that we know of in the village of Champlain, although this house outside the village in the town, the log cabin, is 1797. Anyway, this is the house of Alan Racine. And in 1812, 1814, a lot of activity occurred around this house here, where the soldiers of both armies were camped nearby. And someplace up in the fields, we don't know where, was 2 blockhouses that were built. Plenty Moore urged the American Army to build these blockhouses because the border was more or less a revolving door for the soldiers coming in to Champlain. And they wanted some protection on the outskirts of the village. Outskirts being, of course, right where the Racine house is today. You wouldn't think of it, but village of Champlain was a lot smaller then. So anyway, in 1814, the British were camped someplace nearby. We don't know where. And then in 1813, end of July, Murray's raid occurred in Plattsburgh and all around Burlington, Swanton. And of course, his men rode up the Chazy River and burned down the 2 blockhouses. Matthew Sachs had warned Pliny, saying they're going to be visiting you in a few days, and you better come take down anything around the public, the buildings, which was the blockhouses. So that's the picture, 1815, of the Pliny Moore House, plus a picture in the back. 1938, they dedicated six blue and yellow markers around the town or the village, and this one here is nearby, across from the farmhouse, and that's the picture. The middle one is Oscar Breedenberg giving a little speech there at the dedication, and then there's a modern picture. So all 3 panels are going to be placed by the town and the village at appropriate spots right at each location, in front of the Pliny Moore House, in front of the Dewey's Tavern house, and one in front of the stone farmhouse across the road where the other panel is. So I'm very happy to have these panels. Hopefully we can get some more, and maybe a generic one for the town of Champlain, showing some of the pictures I have here in the back, especially like the map that I have over there showing the route of the British where they took to get down to Plattsburgh. So thank you.
Okay, the stone house that was last referred to is on Prospect Street, and that's where Alan Racine lives, and Racine Paquette grew up also.
Thank you, David. David worked very hard to get these, and we also wanted to thank the Lake Champlain Basin Program for providing these for us. Our next speaker is someone that needs no introduction. Excuse me. Kit Booth has been the energy, the brain, the force behind all the commemoration activities in the Battle of Plattsburgh. You had this idea how many years ago? And look what it is today. I heard Kit and Gary Vancor on Channel 57 last Thursday evening. Kit mentioned that when they first started, they had 25 volunteers. Today they have over 500. This event has grown and keeps growing. Kit.
Thank you, Celine. You're very kind with your remarks. I've been asked to come and tell you a little bit about what we're doing this year that's new. I'm not even going to talk about the old stuff because there's so much new to talk about there wouldn't be time. Tomorrow afternoon, that's Sunday, we're starting with a major program. It's a group of local bands that will be playing at the community college auditorium, and they are the Back Porch Band. Charlie, does this work?
Push it up.
I don't know.
Can I just talk like this? Can you hear me? All right, back. All right, Bonnie. Charlie Stone and Split Rock, and Lita Kelly and Joan Crane will all be playing tomorrow afternoon at the community college. On Monday, we're going to be dedicating some signs like this at Beekmantown, Culver Hill, Halsey's Corners, and the Kent the Lord House Museum. They will all be telling the stories that these tell about those particular locations. On Monday night, Patrick Fitzsimmons is going to be playing at Trinity Church. Tuesday night, Woods Tea Company is coming back. They were here several years ago for a couple of years. A wonderful group. They'll be also playing at Trinity Church on Tuesday night. Wednesday night, we're going to move back to the community college, and we'll be there at their auditorium with Will Patton. It's an ensemble that will be providing entertainment that night. Thursday's a little different this year because unfortunately we were not able to get the whole Navy band here due to the fact that they were called to New York City because of the 9/11 10th anniversary. They'll be playing down there, but we will have their Dixieland combo here. So a new group of singers called Mosaic will be playing the first part of the Thursday night program, and the second part will be played by the Dixieland group from the U.S. Navy Band. On Friday, at 10 o'clock in the morning, the Disabled Veterans of America will be dedicating a stone at the Veterans Park out on the base. The stone will be dedicated to McDonough's Saratoga, the boat that McDonough commanded during the war. They have a stone that has been engraved with a picture of the Saratoga on it, and they will be doing that there. The Dixieland Band then is going to be playing at the Community College at 11:30 for about an hour. Then they'll move to Meadowbrook Nursing Home and play there. We're going to keep them busy at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. On Friday night, BOPA is going to have two very special speakers out at the BOPA Museum. One is Donald Graves. They're both Canadian, husband and wife. Donald Graves was here last year, gave a very good talk. This year he's going to talk about history's strangest conflict. And then his wife, Diane Graves, will talk about women's experiences in the War of 1812. And at 7 o'clock, Bear Tracks will be playing in front of City Hall. They'll be, during their intermission, the Navy Dixieland Band will be playing, and then fireworks will follow the concert on Friday night. Saturday, Cannonball Run will be again in the early morning. The 10 o'clock reenactment will be at Beekmantown. It was very popular last year, so they're going to do it again. While that's going on, there'll be an artillery demonstration down at the Kent Lord House for those who don't want to travel to Beekmantown and want to see something going on down there. Of course, there's lots of other things going on. These are the new ones. At 10 o'clock, the Navy is going to be playing again at Champlain Valley Physicians Hospital if you want to go and hear them. If you like Dixieland, they'll be playing 5 times during the weekend. The parade again is at 1 o'clock. We're very honored to have Major General Michael Dewey being our parade Grand Marshal, and he'll be bringing with him several of his troops from the Vermont Guard. We're trying to honor Vermont's participation in the Battle of Plattsburgh. You know, 2,500 of them came over here from Vermont to help us out, and we want to say thanks to them. So the general will be here with some of his troops. Right after the parade and beat retreat, of course, the Roducky Derby and that crazy rotary bed race will be going on. They expect as many as 40 beds to be involved. 7:30 at night on Saturday, the Royal Marine Band, that wonderful band dressed in red with the white pith helmets, will be playing at the Stafford Middle School in their regular concert. And they'll be doing some remembrances of 9/11 during that concert to pay respect to those who were lost on 9/11. At 8:30, of course, Macomb Ball is going to be this year back at the Elks Club. And as I say, at 8:30, for those of you who are interested in English country dancing and want to either be participating or watch the show. Sunday is a brand new program, the whole day. There are other things going on, but I want to tell you about this one because it's a brand new thing. Been thought up by Linda Ward this year, and she's done practically all the work putting it together. It's going to be called the Children's Old Time Village Fair, and it will feature things like farm home, rural life, history of bicycles, costume dress-up, a story walk, old-time fire equipment and firefighting stories about how things were fought in Plattsburgh over the years, Therapets, the kind of pets that you take to help people with therapy, horseback riding and pony rides, farm animals, kids games, and face painting. Also antique dolls, cider making, cornbread from the kernels to the actual cornbread, and candy for a penny. Penny candy for a penny. Robert Resnick is also going to sing and entertain kids during the same fair. So it goes on all day, from 10 o'clock in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. And then finally at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the college is going to have a memorial, a memorial first and then a concert afterwards entitled Plattsburgh Remembers in Gilt's Auditorium. That's all free for anybody that wants to go. I want to tell you too that the Tavern is open from 4:30 on Friday, all day Saturday from 11 to 11, and Sunday from 11 to 12. And they of course will have entertainment going on all the time that they're open. the kids' games, the muster, and the kids' parade will all be going on as they do have done each year around noon on, well, the kids' games all day, but noon for the muster and the parade for children. I guess those are the new things. Everything is in the programs. We have lots of them here. Please help yourselves. Sally's got some. I've got a few and a lot more in the car. I have buttons here for anybody who wants them, as Celine pointed out. $10 a piece. Gets you into everything. It doesn't ride a horse. You have to pay to do that. And to run in the Cannonball Run, you have to also pay a registration fee. Other than that, everything is covered by the one $10 button. Pretty good bargain. Thank you very much. Hope to see you all later.
The tavern is referring to is not Dewey Tavern, it's Israel Green's Tavern, which is in Plattsburgh. That's or was in Plattsburgh. And
Thank you, Kent. That is a bargain for $10. As you've mentioned, I think it was in the newspaper, it's the best bargain here in the North Country and maybe in the whole state. Kit was very generous with describing his program, but he forgot a very, very important element of all that Kit does. And that's his wonderful wife, Sally. Yeah. And Sally's right here in the front row, and we have to give her credit for all the work she does, too. Very important. Thank you. The co-chair of this event is Gary Vancore. And unfortunately, Gary joins us every year, but was unable to be here today. He had a wedding to attend, I believe. So he's also very, very involved. Next, we have a firing salute under the direction of Craig Russell. Craig has been involved for many, many years, and take it away, Craig.
the reenactors and bagpipers. Smell of sulfur. Phew. That was that little cannon that Craig brought. Josh Wingler and Tom Prey. Another cannon shot. Bagpipers are Jerry Tatro and Al Walker. And some more reenactors firing here.
Thank you to
I
Al
guess that's
Walker and Jerry Tatro for again being with us here this year and giving up your holiday weekend.
Wait, make sure that it's the proper time to talk.
Thanks to all of you who helped to launch our great Battle of Plattsburgh week of activities, and Champlain is proud to have been part of this great celebration, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Now we move on to the raising of the British flag in the Dewey Cemetery across the road.
We've adjourned. It's about 22 minutes after we've left Dewey Tavern. We've adjourned. To the cemetery. Okay, this is the Dewey Cemetery, Dewey Family Cemetery. The soldiers who retreated from the Battle of Plattsburgh, the wounded soldiers, were carried here, treated at Dewey Tavern, and those that did not survive are buried here. This flagpole donated a couple of years back by Woodmen of the World, and starting last year, every year, the British flag is raised in remembrance of these British soldiers who were buried here along with the members of the Dewey family. And this will conclude the ceremony here at the Dewey Tavern and the cemetery. And we thank you for watching. We thank all these reenactors, Al Walker on the bagpipes, and all these reenactors for making this possible.
3 cheers for His Most Britannic Majesty, Monarch of England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, Hanover, and pretty soon all of Napoleon's France, and the newest addition to Lower Canada, Northern New York. Hip hip huzzah! Hip hip huzzah! Hip hip huzzah!
Alright, I think they've got us captured. Oh!
Huzzah! Hip hip huzzah! Hip hip huzzah!
Alright. Alright, cheer for President Madison and Dolly. Thanks for joining us.